Hi guys, and welcome to the page. I am Ken Smith with Ken Smith Gallery. Today we are on our way to visit John Lingo. John is a master engine builder. He is a master head designer for Model A's, and he's also a car builder. And we are going to talk and interview him, ask him about his engine building experience, his head design experience, as well as a two-door Phaeton that John essentially built the body, or the majority of it. So without further ado, let's visit John Lingo. Well, John Lingo, it is a real pleasure to be in front of you. It's a real honor for me, and I mean that with all sincerity. So for my audience, I'd like to know a little bit about you. I'd like for them to know a little bit about you. Now, I do know that you were an Air Force veteran, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And what did you do in the Air Force?
Well, I was a flight engineer for probably the first part, and I was in a crash, and after that I was a watch repair, instrument repairman for the duration.
Okay. And how many years did you serve?
4 years.
Well, thank you for your service.
Yeah.
So you were an instrument repairman after the crash.
Yeah.
And that led into your post-service career, which was you were a jewelry maker, correct?
Jeweler. But I was a jeweler before I went in, and I got a bypass specialist rating after the crash, or went and changed the career field into intricate instruments.
Okay.
Which included watch repair, watchmaking, and watch repair.
Nice, nice. So you ended up owning your own jewelry shop, right? And that was here in Greenville?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many years did you have that shop?
34 years.
34 years. Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me what got you into the Model A hobby to begin with.
Yeah.
So tell me what got you into the Model A hobby to begin with.
Well, I sort of grew up with Model Ts, and had assisted an uncle and kind of semi-restored one before I went in this Air Force. And I drove Model Ts, and I thought that was the collector car. And then after I got out of service, and I think in the mid-50s, things started warming up on the Model A, and they became the collector and the collector car, you know. And so we and a friend of mine and myself and the families went down to Maryville, Tennessee, to Charles Calder's, and he had a collection of Model A's and some Model T's, but probably had 15 or 20 Model A's that just really struck me. It really hit me hard. One of them was a Roadster like the one I have.
Right.
And this was in 1958, I believe, and I bought the Model T that I have restored, and then I got this one, the Model A, in 1960.
This particular one right here.
Yeah, 61, 1961.
Right, and we're gonna kind of take a quick walk around both of these vehicles and whatnot. But there are two things that fascinate me about you. And one, I'm very blessed to have a John Lingo motor in my Model A. But you've done various types of engine building and manufacturing. Is that correct?
Well, I guess I'm sort of a blacksmith, I guess you call it. I built some engines and made some overhead conversions, literally made them, the heads. And this is one.
This is one right in here.
Yeah.
And so tell me, you made a head.
The head, I made that head.
Okay, so tell me how you did that.
Well, I fabricated it. Put a few little modern quirks in it, I guess, and it really performs real well.
Okay. And so is it an overhead valve head?
It's an overhead valve
Okay.
with a wedge type combustion chamber, which is a lot later than, well, several companies made overhead conversions back in Model A days when they were new, 29, I think Riley, several. And, but they were kind of crude, if I say so.
Right.
I mean, if I can say so. So I polished them up a little and put a few modern styles on, you know.
Right. How many heads do you think you made over
Well,
time?
I made 4 of these,
Okay.
like this, and 3, I gave a friend the rights and the design and the measurements and he had patterns made and had them cast in aluminum and manufactured. I'm not sure exactly how many he's since passed away, but I machined 3 of them, and they're here in town. Well, one's in Nashville and 2 here in town.
Okay.
And they perform real well too.
Nice. So your Roadster, does that have any modifications that you did to it?
Yeah, it has a head too.
Okay.
This is a cross flow. If you notice, the exhaust is on the driver's side.
Correct.
And
Yes.
the Model A is normally on the passenger side.
Right.
And this is a cross flow. It's got some mechanical advantages. The exhaust only travels about 1.5 inches and it's out of the engine. Where by a regular Model A and some of the flatheads would travel from one side all the way to the other side and through water jackets and requires a lot more cooling, you know, than
Right.
what it would be otherwise. There's a few little things like that.
So how many places have you taken this car over time?
Well, this one, the Roadster, I've driven it at probably 120,000 miles on tour. This one, about 15,000. All together, about 180, 85,000 is just an estimate. But
And when you say you've been on tours, you've gone up to Canada.
yeah.
And tell me about the experience in Canada.
Well, we were in Toronto. It was an international meet in Toronto, and a friend and myself drove Roadsters up there. He had a Roadster similar to mine, a different color. And we were leaving, fixing to come home, and he took off in front of us, and I got delayed. And somehow, I don't remember which way he went, so I didn't know. And couldn't reach him on the CB. So my wife said, well, I'll stay here and you go and find him and bring him back. So her pocketbook was in my car. There she was in a foreign country with no identification or anything. If somebody had come, she couldn't prove who she was or what. But luckily we caught Johnson, and we really didn't realize what kind of a mess we could have gotten into.
Right.
And my absent-mindedness, it's a wonder I found how to get back, but somehow I did.
Yeah, that was long before the days of cell phones and GPS and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But
That was a 2,000-mile trip, and it was a very good trip.
yeah. And you shared with the club at our last meeting about kind of a fun little thing that had happened on one of the tours with someone else and their luggage. Could you?
Yeah, that was Danny Buchanan from Newland, North Carolina. He was a member of our club, and he's since passed away. His wife attends meetings quite often. But anyway, we were in Detroit and on the interstate and just got on and got up to speed, and all at once his luggage fell off. He had it tied on with a bread tray that you carry bread in, you
Right.
know, and it just went everywhere. And they just closed the interstate down. Cars were swerving and skidding and sliding, and finally everything stopped on the Interstate 75 in downtown Detroit. And Danny jumped out and grabbed his luggage, and some of it had sort of come open, if I remember right. Anyway, he grabbed it and folded it up and dumped it back in this place, and we took off again. So it was quite fun.
So, the first time I saw this car, I fell in love with it. I really did. It's just absolutely a beautiful car. But what I did not know until talking with one of the other club members, because you hadn't even mentioned it. You're a pretty humble guy for your skill sets.
I hope so.
And but you made this car. You didn't restore it. You made this car.
A lot of it, yes.
And so tell me what you did.
I've always liked the 180s and was never did get one, and had one a few times, close to it a few times. But anyway, my wife and I were at a place that had a 180 for sale, just a junk car. And I looked at it, and it was so rough, and I made a statement to her that I could make the car easier and I could fix that one.
Right.
So that was sort of a challenge, or opened up a can of worms, I guess. And so I've always wanted to make a car, and I was 70, 71 at that time, and I'd better get busy, you know, if I was going to ever do that. And so it all came together, and I borrowed the back of the tub, what we call the tub of the body, and a door, and the top irons, and various other things that were didn't interchange with the regular Model A. So I ordered steel. I ordered 2 pieces of 18 gauge, 20 gauge steel, 10 by 4 feet, 2 sheets of it, and that's what made the body. We used that, and somehow I got it done.
Well, and I think you started out with the frame, obviously a rolling chassis, and I think that you mentioned the cowl
from Mike.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you had a cowl. I think you said you got the cowl from Mike too.
Yeah, yeah. And the hood, I bought it.
Right.
And the fenders, I bought them, but they were rough, you know. But the body itself, the doors and the back end, the all the top irons and the mechanism, I made them here in the basement.
Right.
And,
So how did you form the metal?
well, I had a bead roller, and I had a friend that had a brake, and I made patterns, extensive patterns of paper patterns that I could trace, you know, tracing pattern. And it just somehow just started, you know, and it came about. You can see in the pictures how it transformed, you know, into
Yeah.
a car.
Yeah.
And I guess I fooled myself. I sure wouldn't want to do another one and expect it to be as good as the one that I built. You know,
Yeah.
it'd be,
So you started on this car,
and not 22 years ago.
and how long did it take for you to complete it?
A year and a half probably, and I was held up 2 or 3 months with top material that I wanted, particular the green,
Uh-huh.
and I could have finished it probably in a year and 3 months if that'd been my goal and could have got everything, you know.
Wow, that's just amazing.
I painted it, made it, strapped it, and I fooled myself.
Well, I'm sure you could probably fool many a Model Air
Well,
that you manufactured the body of this.
we were in Indianapolis. I drove to Indianapolis, a national meet, and a friend was standing in the car, and some of the experts came and looked at it. There was several 180s parked there.
Right.
And they looked at it, and he listened to them and said, "Boy, that one sure must have had a good body to start with." You know, they're pointing out my car.
So out of all of your cars, you've got the Roadster here, you've got the Phaeton here, you've got a Vicky over there, you've got the Model T there. Which one's your favorite?
Oh, I guess this one has been my loyal friend for a long time,
Right.
a lot of miles. I don't know. They're like, which of your children do you like?
No, that's true. Yeah. I've got 4 children, and you know, I always tell people they're just like the fingers on my hand. I love them all, but they're all different.
Yeah.
You know.
Well,
and,
it's the same way with the car.
sure. Yeah.
The Roadster's been faithful. You know, been a long ways in it. So.
Did you ever have a breakdown that made you a bit nervous?
Well, I drove the Roadster to a national meet in Indianapolis, not the one that I was talking about just recently. And on the way back, I left on a Saturday night, and I was going to drive back home, really. And it was about over 100 degrees, outside temperature was. And I was running about 60, and I heard a little noise in the engine, and I had a rod, the bag turned loose and fluttered. And about 30 miles out of Louisville, Kentucky. And I knew what it was, but that's still 30 miles out of Louisville, Kentucky is still about 270 miles or 300 miles from Greenville, Tennessee.
Right.
So we got off, I could just let it float, and it would not. If I pushed too much or let it off on it, you know, just let it float. Well, I got along pretty good. And I got off the interstate in Louisville, Kentucky. I saw a service station that had a bay that was not being used, and I asked a fellow if I could use that empty bay. He had a lift and everything, and he said yes. So he'd use his tools, and I took the pan off, and there the rod would just shake, you know. Well, I didn't have a rod with it, so I called a friend that was at the national meet at, I don't know, wherever it was in Indianapolis. And I called, they were having a banquet, and he got a microphone and told them that had a situation pretty bad, you know, needed a rod. And a vendor there had a rod. And another friend left early Sunday morning, and I told him where I was, and he dropped it off, and I had everything took apart, piston out, and slipped it, put it in, and in about 2 hours we were on the road.
That's unbelievable.
It may not work like that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't know that you'd be able to just pull up to a service station and use a bay.
I know.
But, you know, it was a different time too.
Yeah, the good Lord was with me.
Yes. For many, many miles, He has been with you. You mentioned probably 150,000 miles or so driving Model A's.
Yeah.
And that's,
Well, all about maybe 180.
yeah,
So
that's an amazing.
that's a lot.
It's an amazing feat just for any individual to drive that many miles, but it's also a credit to Henry Ford and how reliable these cars have been over the years.
Yeah.
It really is. So speaking of cars, John, let's take a look at some of the cars that you've got,
Okay.
and we'll take a peek underneath the hood and kind of see a little bit about each car, okay?
Okay.
All right, we'll start with the Roadster. So, John, tell me a little bit about your
Okay.
Roadster.
It's a 1930 Deluxe Roadster. It's has leather from the factory. This is not the original leather, but they came new. The Deluxe, the Depression had hit, and Ford came out with something a little better to try to get the market that was people that lost their income and couldn't afford a big car, so they didn't want a plain Ford. So he came out with a few deluxe models, and that's one of them. This engine has got my homemade head on, and it's an overhead valve, and it's got an overdrive, and it runs good. I'll put probably at least 120,000 miles on it, probably. So.
And this is a 30, right?
1930.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful car. Absolutely gorgeous.
And it's has two spars and the fenders.
Mm-hmm.
They're more for ornament, I guess, than they are being used. But
Right.
and it has a luggage carrier on the back and a roll seat, a khaki top.
And did you restore this car?
Pardon me?
Did you restore this car?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was it pretty rough when you got it?
Well, it was in primer. So a fellow had worked on it some, but I had to prime it. I had about 35,000, I think, on it. And of course, we restored it. Why, that took it back practically to zero. But it's been a good friend.
John, obviously this is the pride of your fleet, or at least from my perspective. But tell me about your 31 and the motor inside here. We can get a little better look. Is there anything in here that you didn't tell me about earlier?
I don't think so. You basically covered it. It's got some modern and there's custom work done on the engine, but the body and frame and running gears is as it was.
Let's take a look
Strictly Model
inside.
A.
Let's take a look inside the interior.
I don't cut them up when I put change the engines or anything like that.
Just a beautiful car. Now this is a 1916 Roadster.
1916,
Uh-huh.
brass, straight fenders, flat. You can tell they come out straight. And this is the first year, first change where the fenders went around over the rear wheels,
Okay.
but they're still flat. And in 1917, they put a crown on the top of the fenders, the little curve, and various other changes. And this is the last year for the brass radiator. As speedometer.
So definitely a brass era, what you call a brass era
It
car,
is,
correct?
yes.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the coveted Model A, the 1931 Vicky.
Yeah.
And
this is a Victoria Coupe,
okay.
and it's that's the first one. They came out in December of 1930, and there's a lot of, but they were 31s actually. So there's only 1 year of Model A's that they did the Victoria. And of course they made them in V8s, and they're still making them, you know. And it's a little fancy Model A. It doesn't have a visor over the windshield, and it has mohair upholstery and wood grain. And,
Can we take a look inside?
yeah.
Yeah, so the mohair interior, that was kind of the top of the line
Yeah.
Henry Ford type of thing.
Well, I don't know why, because if you sit in it, you cannot move.
Yeah, I have that in my town car, and I know that feeling all too well. Yeah,
And
almost.
there's a mahogany wood grain trim.
Right. And was this also another car that you had restored?
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
This particular one has a 2-speed rear end in it,
Okay.
and an engine identical to the one that you have.
Yeah.
And it goes over the road. I've driven this to Louisiana, Washington, Front Royal, a lot of long trips.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel very comfortable in the motor that I got from you, and you know, its first really hard road trip was going all the way to Dearborn,
Yeah.
and it performed quite well. John, this is where the magic happens with the engines, isn't it?
This is part of it.
Yeah. So, kind of explain to my viewers what we've got here.
Well, it's kind of a Mickey Mouse machine shop, or has a lathe and a kind of a milling machine that's sort of, and it's where I play. It's a playhouse, a toy shop.
Right. Well, it's pretty incredible toy shop that you produce, obviously. But this is where you did all of the headwork and
The heads.
the
were-
engine assemblies. You would send you would send the engines out to get them.
I'd send them out to get the cylinders bored.
Right.
But we do the line boring for the bearings right here,
Yeah.
and the valve work and the head work and all. I made the heads here,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. So this is the birthplace of my motor,
yeah,
as well as
precious,
several others.
precious memories.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure. Well, John, speaking of memories, this is a memory that I'm going to cherish for a long, long time. Thank you so much for just carving out some time. I really appreciate it. I can't say enough other than just thank you for your time. So
Well, I appreciate you thinking of me and including me and you've done several videos, and that's nationally recognized. And so,
yeah, well, they're out there anyway. Thanks again, John. I appreciate it.